Ever dealt with a day that begins ordinary and ends with your world burning down? That was my Tuesday. Routine, predictable, until a voice on the radio changed everything. Sheriff Morrison, there's been a shooting. Intersection of Maple and 5th. Female victim, gunshot wound to the chest. Ambulance on scene. The dispatcher's words felt distant, like they were floating underwater. I was in a budget meeting. Papers, numbers, meaningless chatter about department expenses. But the moment I heard female victim, something inside me snapped awake. Location, I said, my tone calm, trained, the voice of a man who'd done this for 20 years. But my hands were shaking against the oak table. Maple and 5th, sir. That was near Lily's school, my daughter's school. My stomach turned to ice. Victim's name? I asked, even though I already knew the answer my heart refused to hear. Sir, we don't have… I was already running. Out of the meeting, down the stairs, past startled deputies. The hall blurred around me. My mind screamed only one word. Lily. I hit the patrol car, sirens roaring before I even fastened my belt. My phone buzzed against the dashboard. Rebecca's name. My wife. I answered, and the scream that came through the phone didn't sound human. They shot her, David. They shot Lily. The world tilted. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Where are you? I managed, gripping the steering wheel so hard it creaked. In the ambulance, she cried. There's so much blood. Oh God, David, there's so much blood. Stay with her, I said. My voice cracked for the first time in years. I'm coming. The sirens wailed like they were mourning ahead of me. I blew through lights, through traffic, chasing the seconds I'd already lost. The county blurred into color and noise, tires screaming, heart pounding, my breath shallow and hot in my chest. Lily, 16 years old, my little girl with a heart that had already fought too many battles, born with a congenital defect. 3 surgeries before she was 10. We called her our miracle. The doctors warned us her heart was fragile. Avoid stress, avoid trauma. I'd spent years protecting her from scraped knees, from broken hearts, from the world's sharp edges. And now, someone had shot her. When I reached the intersection, the world turned to chaos. Yellow tape snapping in the wind, flashing lights painting everything red and blue. The smell of gasoline and copper hung in the air. I saw the dark pool on the asphalt before I saw the paramedic's empty stretcher. Blood. Her blood. Sheriff! Officer Martinez ran toward me, his face pale. Sir, I didn't know it was… Where is she? I barked. Hospital, St. Mary's. Sir, the suspect fled, but we have witnesses, a plate number. His words blurred together until one name cut through like a blade. Witnesses say it was Karen Westfield. The name hit like a punch. Everyone in the county knew her, the self-proclaimed queen of Riverside Estates, the HOA president who terrorized neighbors over mailbox colors and lawn heights. But never, not once had I imagined she'd be capable of this. Get me everything, I said. Footage, witnesses, her car. I want her in custody within the hour. Yes, sir. I got back in my car, but my body wouldn't stop trembling. My mind flashed between images of Lily, her laughing on the porch, her prom dress last week, her frail chest scar from childhood surgeries. I pressed harder on the gas, praying, bargaining with every mile. Please, God, please let my baby be okay. When I burst through the hospital doors, the world smelled like antiseptic and fear. The nurse at the counter looked up, recognized the uniform, then my face. Sheriff Morrison, she said softly, your wife is in trauma room 3. Your daughter, she's in surgery. Surgery. The word sliced through me. Rebecca was sitting outside the trauma bay, covered in blood. Our daughter's blood. She looked at me like a ghost who had forgotten how to speak. I dropped to my knees in front of her. They shot her, David, she whispered, voice cracking. Right in the chest. She was just driving, going to pick up her prescription. That woman started screaming at her about cutting her off. Lily apologized. She said she was sorry. And that monster pulled a gun and… Rebecca broke, sobbing into my chest. The world spun, then went still. I felt my heart, heavy and useless, trying to beat against the weight of it all. Left side of her chest, near the heart. That's where the bullet had gone in. And I knew in that moment this wasn't just another case. This was war. I held my wife tighter as the machines hummed behind the trauma doors. The sound of the ventilator inside that room was faint but steady, like a whisper. I couldn't see my daughter yet, but I could hear her life fighting to stay. Rebecca looked up, tears streaming down her face. David, what if her heart gives out? It won't, I said, though I wasn't sure if I was lying, because deep down, I knew what Dr. Patel had once told us. Another trauma could kill her. And now someone's rage might have done exactly that. As I stood there, blood drying on my hands, my badge suddenly felt heavier than it ever had before. I wasn't just the sheriff anymore. I was a father whose daughter had been shot, by the last person anyone expected. And as the hospital doors swung open and nurses rushed past me, I heard Rebecca whisper it again, like a curse that would haunt me forever. They shot Lily. The hallway outside Trauma Room 3 smelled of antiseptic, blood, and fear. Nurses rushed past with stainless steel trays clattering, their shoes squeaking on the tile. The air was too bright, too cold. I'd spent half my life inside emergency rooms, investigating shootings, comforting victims, families. But this time, I was the family. This time, the blood on my wife's clothes wasn't a stranger's, it was my daughter's. Rebecca sat slumped in the corner, her hands trembling in her lap. Lily's pink backpack was beside her, spattered with dark stains. I'd bought it for her before the school year started. She said it made her look more grown up. Now it looked like evidence. I approached slowly, my boots sticking faintly with every step. When Rebecca looked up, I saw a woman who had aged 20 years in an hour. Her eyes were hollow, her lips quivering. She was just driving, she whispered before I even spoke. She was on her way to the pharmacy to pick up her prescription. She called me from the car, said she was on Maple, and then I heard shouting, screaming. Her voice broke into fragments. That woman, Karen, I think, started yelling that Lily cut her off. Lily apologized. She said, "I'm sorry, ma'am." I heard her say it. And then Rebecca's voice dropped to a whisper, shaking. Then there was a gunshot. Just one. I felt every word like a hammer blow. My throat burned. I had to swallow hard to keep from breaking in front of her. The paramedics said the bullet hit her on the left side. Rebecca continued. Close to her heart. David, there was so much blood. I tried to hold it in, but it just... She covered her mouth, sobbing, her body trembling violently. She was trying to breathe. I kept telling her to stay with me. I knelt in front of her and pulled her into my arms. She's strong, Rebecca. She's our fighter. My own voice didn't sound convincing, but I said it anyway because she needed to hear it. The doors to Trauma Room 3 swung open, and a doctor stepped out, mask still around his neck. Dr. Patel, Lily's cardiologist, the man who'd seen her through every operation since she was a baby. His face said everything before he opened his mouth. "Sheriff, Mrs. Morrison," he said quietly. "Lily's condition is critical. The bullet entered her chest just 2 centimeters from her heart. It's lodged near the pericardium." He paused, his eyes flicking to the blood on Rebecca's clothes. "We can't remove it right now. Her heart is too weak to survive surgery." Rebecca gasped. "Then what are you doing? You can't just leave it in her." "We're stabilizing her," Patel said, his voice calm but heavy. "She's in a medically induced coma to reduce stress on her heart. But I need to be honest with you, her heart rate is dangerously high despite the sedation. She's fighting, but the trauma was severe. Any further stress could trigger cardiac failure." I clenched my fists. My badge felt useless now. All the authority in the world couldn't save her. "You've seen her come through worse," I said, almost pleading. "You've seen her survive the impossible." Patel nodded slowly. "Yes, I have. But this is different. The bullet's position, it's unpredictable. If it shifts even a millimeter, it could pierce her heart wall." Rebecca made a sound that barely resembled a word. somewhere between a sob and a scream. You have to save her. We're doing everything we can, Patel said softly, but you both need to prepare yourselves. The next 48 hours will determine everything. Prepare ourselves. The phrase echoed through me like a gunshot. Doctors never said death. They said prepare yourself. I'd heard it too many times at crime scenes, too many times in hallways like this one. Now I understood what it really meant. When Patel left, Rebecca collapsed against me again. David, I can't lose her. Not like this. Not to some monster with a gun. You won't, I said, though my voice cracked. You hear me? She's going to make it. Through the glass window I could see the edge of Lily's bed. Wires, tubes, machines, the rhythm of her heart monitor pulsing in an irregular beat. A weak but steady sound. I stared at the monitor like I could will it to keep going, like each beep was a prayer I wasn't sure God was listening to. She looked so small in that room. My little girl, who once survived open-heart surgery before she even learned to read. The doctors used to call her a miracle. I'd forgotten how fragile miracles really are. Rebecca whispered, she's always been so brave. Remember when she asked Dr. Patel if she could have a heart made of steel so she wouldn't break again? I nodded. Maybe she already does. We sat there in silence, two parents clinging to a hope thinner than breath. The night outside was dark, heavy with rain. Somewhere in this same town, the woman who did this was probably sitting in her mansion, maybe still holding the gun that tore our lives apart. I watched the monitor again, one weak heartbeat after another, and felt the world narrow down to that sound. Beep, beep, each one a question, each one a promise. When Patel returned an hour later, his face was no better than before. She's stable, but it's fragile, he said. Her heart is under enormous strain. If it doesn't improve by morning, he hesitated. Prepare yourselves. The words landed like the final echo of a gunshot. Quiet, cold, and absolute. The hours crawled by like years. The hospital lights never dimmed, and the smell of antiseptic clung to my clothes. I sat outside Lily's ICU room, the rhythmic beeping of her heart monitor the only proof that she was still here. Rebecca was asleep in a chair beside me, her hand gripping Lily's backpack like it was a lifeline. My phone buzzed on the metal table, its vibration cutting through the silence. It was Martinez. Sheriff, he said, his voice hesitant, like he didn't want to say the words. We got a positive ID on the suspect. I stood, my pulse thudding in my ears. Who is it? There was a pause, too long, too careful. Sir, witnesses say it was Karen Westfield. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Say that again. Karen Westfield, sir. HOA President of Riverside Estates. Black Mercedes registered to her plate. 4 witnesses confirm it. The phone felt slick in my palm. Karen Westfield. The name was like a bad taste I couldn't spit out. Everyone in this county knew her. The self-appointed queen of Riverside Estates. A gated community where the hedges were symmetrical, the driveways spotless, and the neighbors miserable. She was the kind of woman who'd fine you for leaving your trash can out 5 minutes past pickup. I'd seen her name on complaint forms more times than I could count. Petty, relentless, and vindictive. But a shooter? She pulled a gun on my daughter? I asked quietly. Yes, sir. Witnesses say there was a traffic argument. The girl, Lily, apologized. Then Westfield drew a firearm and fired through the driver's window. Fled the scene immediately. My chest tightened. I looked through the glass at Lily, still motionless, surrounded by machines, and the fury that rose in me was something raw and unfamiliar. I'd seen murderers. I'd seen monsters, but somehow this hit worse. Because I knew Karen Westfield. She was the same woman who'd stood in front of the county council last year, demanding my deputies do something about the noise from a veterans' charity car wash. The same woman who had her neighbor arrested for parking a truck with an American flag decal too close to her property line. She didn't just want control, she lived for it. I walked out into the corridor, needing air. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. Find her, I told Martinez. Get me every witness statement, every camera angle. I want her in custody within the hour. Yes, sir. But, there's more. Go on. She's got priors for aggressive driving. 3 complaints, 2 restraining orders from former neighbors, both citing verbal threats and intimidation. I stopped walking. Restraining orders. Yes, sir. And somehow she still has an active concealed carry permit. Guns registered and legal. A bitter laugh escaped me. So a woman with documented anger issues and restraining orders gets to carry a gun. That's our system. He hesitated. What do you want us to do if she resists? Treat her like any armed suspect, I said coldly. But I want her alive. She's going to answer for this. When the call ended, I leaned against the cold tile wall, my reflection staring back from the polished floor. For years I'd enforced the law believing it protected people like Lily, from recklessness, from hate, from people like Karen Westfield. But now I realized how fragile that protection really was. One signature, one overlooked form, and a violent woman could walk around legally armed. I thought of a line from the sheriff's manual I'd helped write years ago. People with active restraining orders are prohibited from obtaining firearm licenses. A line that clearly meant nothing when the right attorney and the right money were involved. I dialed my chief investigator, James Chin, a man I trusted more than anyone in uniform. James, drop whatever you're doing. Take lead on this. Westfield's armed and dangerous. Get eyes on her property. I'm already on it, he said. We've got her car on traffic cameras heading back toward Riverside Estates. My guess is she's home. Call in backup. Don't go in alone. Understood. But boss, you should stay here. Let us handle it. His tone was gentle, but the words lit a fire in me. She shot my daughter, James. My 16-year-old little girl who might not live to see morning. You think I can sit here while someone else arrests her? Silence, then a quiet sigh. I know you're hurting, but if you go, and something happens, this whole case unravels. Please, don't make it worse. I hear you, I said, forcing the words out. Agreed. But the lie tasted sour the moment it left my mouth. I looked back through the ICU window one last time. Lily's fragile body was covered in wires, the steady pulse of her monitor like a drumbeat inside my skull. The sight of her chest rising and falling wasn't enough. I needed to do something. I needed to look the person who did this in the eye. I grabbed my hat from the chair, the weight of the badge pressing cold against my chest. I'm coming, I muttered under my breath, walking toward the elevator. Because I wasn't just her father. I was the sheriff of this county, and tonight, justice had a heartbeat. The road into Riverside Estates was quiet. Too quiet for what had happened only hours earlier. As I turned past the stone gate pillars, the headlights caught rows of pristine houses lined like trophies on manicured lawns. Every blade of grass was identical, trimmed with mathematical precision. Garden lights glowed softly beside sculpted hedges, and not a single trash can or fallen leaf dared to mar the image. It was a neighborhood that looked perfect, because people like Karen Westfield demanded it to be. When I was a rookie deputy, we used to joke about Riverside Estates being the most peaceful battleground in the county. You couldn't hear gunfire here, but you could hear war. Petty wars over mailbox designs, fence heights, and paint shades. And the general of it all was one woman, Karen Westfield, HOA President, community tyrant. Tonight, her kingdom was surrounded by patrol cars. Blue and red lights danced across white columns and hydrangeas. Officers took positions behind cruisers, rifles ready but low. Karen's house was the largest one on the street. 3 stories, Greek columns, and a fountain shaped like an angel pouring water that now glittered under flashing lights. Everything about it screamed control. James Chin met me at the curb, his phone still pressed to his ear. She's inside, he said quietly. Neighbors saw her come home 20 minutes ago. She's been peeking through the curtains. No signs of surrender. I nodded, scanning the windows. Curtains twitched upstairs, Faint movement behind glass. She knows we're here. Lawyers on the way. She called him before we even got to her street. Of course she did. I adjusted my holster, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Any contact yet? Only through the door, James said. She told officers she exercised her right to self-defense. Says the girl was driving recklessly and tried to run her off the road. The audacity made my jaw tighten. Self-defense, I repeated, my voice flat. A 16-year-old girl, unarmed, apologizing. James hesitated, lowering his voice. David, you shouldn't go in. You're too close to this. I'm not going in as a father, I said, though we both knew that was a lie. I'm going in as the sheriff. I can do a wellness check. That's procedure. He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Be careful. I walked up the stone path toward her front door. The gravel crunched under my boots, echoing through the otherwise perfect stillness. Porch lights flared as I stepped into the glow of her security system. Somewhere, a sprinkler clicked to life, the hiss of water cutting through the silence. I knocked hard. Karen Westfield, I called. This is Sheriff Morrison. Open the door. Nothing. Just the sound of the fountain trickling and radios murmuring behind me. I knocked again, louder this time. Karen, we have witnesses and camera footage of your vehicle leaving the scene. Open the door now. A lock clicked, and the door opened just enough for her face to appear. She looked exactly as I remembered. Mid-40s. Perfectly styled blonde hair, not a strand out of place. Makeup flawless. Cold blue eyes staring through me like I was beneath her. I have nothing to say without my attorney, she said evenly. You shot a teenage girl today, I replied, my voice low. You're lucky she's still alive. Her chin lifted. I exercised my right to self-defense. That girl tried to run me off the road. You fired through her window, Karen. Through glass. She was aggressive. I felt threatened. I took a step closer, my reflection flickering in her glass storm door. She was 16 years old, I said, and unarmed. Karen's lips curled faintly. Then she shouldn't be driving if she can't control her car, or her attitude. I was protecting myself. My blood boiled. The urge to shout her down surged up, but I forced it back. My badge pressed cold against my chest. You know what the law says about people with restraining orders, don't you? You're not supposed to have a gun. Her expression flickered, just for a heartbeat. Those were civil disputes, she snapped. My record is clean. My permit is valid. I stared at her, feeling something dark twist in my chest. I didn't know which was worse, her arrogance or her certainty that she could talk her way out of this. The girl you shot, I said slowly, is my daughter. For the first time I saw it. The brief flash of realization, of fear. Then it vanished, buried under that same smug mask. Then you should have taught her to drive more carefully, she said coldly. Now if you'll excuse me. I shoved the door open and she stumbled back, startled. Karen Westfield, you're under arrest for attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, and reckless endangerment, I said, my voice cutting through the night. You have the right to remain silent. She tried to close the door, but James and 2 officers moved in, restraining her as she screamed. This is police brutality. I'm a citizen with rights. You can't just barge into my home. We have witnesses, footage, and a victim fighting for her life, James said firmly as he cuffed her. Karen fought the entire way down the steps, heels scraping against the stone. You're making a mistake. I was defending myself. I followed them silently, the cool night air hitting my face like ice. As they put her in the patrol car, she turned her head toward me, eyes burning with fury. You'll regret this, she hissed through the window. I stared back at her, the blue lights flashing across her face, washing out every trace of humanity. There was no remorse, no guilt, just rage that she'd been caught. And as the cruiser pulled away from her perfect little street, all I could think was that my daughter was still in a hospital bed fighting for her life, while her shooter slept in a holding cell without a single tear. The ICU was colder than I remembered hospitals ever being. Maybe it was the machines, the steady hum, the rhythmic beep of monitors, the soft hiss of oxygen through tubes, that made everything feel so mechanical, so detached from life. But Lily was there, lying motionless beneath white sheets, her face pale against the sterile blue light. A dozen wires and tubes connected her to machines that kept her heart stable, or tried to. I'd faced crime scenes, car wrecks, murder trials. Nothing had ever scared me like that soft, fragile beeping sound did now. Rebecca sat beside her, still wearing the same blood-stained sweater from the night before. Her hands never left Lily's. She whispered things to her. Stories, prayers, memories. Anything to fill the silence. Sometimes she'd stop mid-sentence, press her forehead to Lily's hand, and just weep. I wanted to comfort her, but my words felt useless. What could I say to a mother whose child was lying somewhere between life and death because of someone else's arrogance? I stood on the other side of the bed, watching the tiny rise and fall of Lily's chest. There were moments where it barely moved, and my entire body would tense, waiting for the next breath. Her hair was spread across the pillow like spun gold, streaked with a little dried blood near her temple. I'd seen my deputies injured before. I'd even lost men in the line of duty, but this was different. This wasn't a badge or a case number. This was my little girl, my miracle. I reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. "Hey, baby," I whispered. "It's Dad. You're doing great, sweetheart. You just keep fighting, okay?" My voice cracked halfway through. I hadn't cried in years. Not when my father died, not when I buried my first partner. But seeing my daughter like that shattered every wall I'd built. Rebecca lifted her head, her eyes swollen. "You arrested her?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Karen Westfield's in custody. She's claiming self-defense." Rebecca's face twisted in disbelief. "Self-defense?" "She shot a child who apologized to her." "I know," I said, my throat tight. "We'll prove her wrong." She turned her gaze back to Lily. "I don't care about proving her wrong, David. I want Lily to live." The words hit like a punch. I'd been thinking about justice, about trials, about punishment. But Rebecca was right. None of it mattered if Lily didn't make it. I sank into the chair beside her, burying my face in my hands. The sound of the machines filled the silence again. Beep, beep. Each one felt like a lifeline. My mind drifted back to the first time I heard a heart monitor like this. Lily was barely 6 months old, her tiny body surrounded by tubes after her first open heart surgery. I'd stood in a pediatric ICU then too, terrified to even breathe too loudly, afraid it would disturb her fragile rhythm. She survived that one, then another at age 4, and a third before she turned 10. Each time she'd come out smiling, asking the nurses for ice cream. "You're our fighter," they used to call her. The little girl with the lion heart. Now that same heart was hanging by a thread because someone couldn't control their temper in traffic. Rebecca leaned her head on my shoulder. "She used to say she wanted to be a doctor," she whispered. "Said she wanted to help other kids like her." I nodded slowly. "She still can. She just needs to wake up." For the next few hours, we sat in silence. I counted her breaths. I prayed for miracles I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Outside the window, dawn began to bleed through the blinds, soft orange light spilling across the machines. For a moment, it almost looked peaceful. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from James. "Westfield booked. Lawyer already filing motions. Says she feared for her life." I stared at the words until they blurred. My life had become 2 realities. One where my daughter might die, and one where her shooter played victim. I looked at Lily again and whispered, "What would you do if someone shot your child and called it self-defense?" I wanted the world to answer that question, not for sympathy, but for truth. Because somewhere out there, people like Karen hid behind laws meant to protect them, twisting them into shields for violence. The door opened softly and Dr. Patel stepped in. His face was drawn, his tone cautious. "Her vitals are holding, but the strain on her heart is worsening. The bullet's still dangerously close. If her condition doesn't improve soon, He hesitated, his eyes flicking to both of us. You should prepare yourselves. Rebecca let out a broken sound, a mixture of rage and grief. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Patel's words seemed to echo inside my skull, hollow and endless. Prepare yourselves. I turned back to the bed, gripping Lily's hand, feeling the faint warmth of her skin. No, I whispered. You don't get to go. Not after everything you fought through. The monitor beeped again, slow but steady, and I realized that as long as it kept beating, there was still a chance, no matter how small. But deep down, beneath the steady rhythm of that machine, another sound grew louder. The voice of a father who'd sworn to uphold the law, but was now willing to break it if it meant saving his child. By the next morning, the story had already hit the local news. Teen girl shot in road rage incident. HOA President arrested. Reporters camped outside the hospital. Cameras flashed every time I walked down the corridor, their microphones reaching like claws through the doors. But none of that mattered. All that mattered was that Lily was still breathing. Barely. Inside her ICU room, the machines were still singing their metallic lullaby. Rebecca hadn't moved all night. She sat in the same chair, eyes fixed on the monitor, whispering Lily's name like a prayer. I wanted to stay there forever, but duty clawed at me. I couldn't protect Lily from a hospital bed. The least I could do was make sure the woman who did this never saw daylight again. In my office, stacks of paperwork waited. Reports, statements, warrants. James Chin walked in, holding his phone. Boss, you're gonna want to take this call, he said. A resident from Riverside Estates says she's got information on Westfield. I took the phone. This is Sheriff Morrison. A nervous voice answered, trembling slightly. Sheriff, this is Angela Torres. I saw the news about your daughter. I'm so sorry for what happened, but I had to call because Karen's done this before. The words made me stand straight. Done what before, Ms. Torres? Threatened people, with her gun. Angela's voice shook, but her resolve didn't. 3 months ago, during an HOA meeting, my husband questioned her about the budget. He asked why community funds were being used for her personal landscaping. She pulled out her handgun, right there in the clubhouse, and waved it at him. Told him she'd end this nonsense permanently if he kept spreading lies. We wanted to report it, but we were scared. Scared of what? Of her, Sheriff. Of what she can do. She has friends in City Hall. Lawyers. She's ruined people's reputations. She got one family evicted just for filing a complaint against her. We thought if we stayed quiet, we'd be safe. My grip on the phone tightened. Are you willing to give a formal statement? Yes. And we're not the only ones. There are at least 5 families who've been threatened, some with lawsuits, others with that same gun. People have been terrified to speak up. But after what she did to your daughter, we can't stay silent anymore. Thank you, Ms. Torres, I said, the words heavy with meaning. I'll send someone to take your statement today. You're doing the right thing. When the call ended, I sat for a long time staring at the wall. I'd spent my career believing that corruption existed in far-off places. Politicians, corporations, big city officials, but not here, not in my own backyard. And yet, an HOA president had managed to build a tiny empire of fear, protected by silence and money. James leaned against the desk. We've already started cross-checking her claims. HOA meeting minutes show disputes, missing funds, and multiple fines issued to residents who tried to question her authority. The woman's been running Riverside Estates like a dictatorship. Get me every name, I said. Every family she's threatened. We're going to build a pattern of abuse that even her lawyer can't spin. Already on it, James said. But boss, you should know, her attorney filed for bail this morning. My heart dropped. Bail? For attempted murder? He nodded grimly. The judge approved it. $500,000. She paid it in full. Walked out 20 minutes ago. The room tilted for a moment. You're telling me she's free? James nodded again. She's back at her mansion, smug as ever, Cameras caught her smiling as she left the courthouse. Her lawyer told reporters she's a law-abiding citizen who acted in fear for her life. I slammed my fist on the desk, the sound echoing through the office. Fear for her life? She fired into a car with a child inside. My daughter is fighting for every heartbeat she has left. James said nothing. He didn't have to. We both knew what came next. I turned toward the window, staring out at the parking lot below. The same reporters who'd been chasing her now waited for my statement. The same public that cheered her arrest was about to watch her walk free. People with restraining orders shouldn't hold gun licenses, I muttered, more to myself than anyone. And yet she's out there again, carrying the same weapon she used to nearly kill a child. James stepped forward carefully. David, we'll get her, but you need to be patient. We can't afford mistakes. Not now. Patience. The word felt foreign in my mouth. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, dark clouds gathering over the courthouse spire. It felt like the whole county was holding its breath, waiting for the next storm to break. I thought of Angela Torres, trembling but brave enough to speak up, and of the other neighbors who'd finally found their voices. Karen Westfield's empire of silence was cracking, and when it fell, I would be there to watch. But as I looked at my phone again, one image froze me, the news alert flashing across the screen. HOA President released on bail, claims self-defense. The woman who shot my daughter was walking free, her head held high, her lips twisted into a smile for the cameras. And in that moment, I swore she wouldn't stay free for long. By noon the next day, the hospital waiting room felt less like a sanctuary and more like a war zone. Cameras flashed outside the sliding glass doors. Reporters shoved microphones toward anyone in uniform, asking questions they already had answers to. I'd been through media frenzies before. Officer-involved shootings, drug raids gone wrong, but this time the headlines weren't about Sheriff Morrison's department. They were about my family. Sheriff's daughter shot in road rage incident. HOA President claims self-defense. I watched the coverage on the small TV in the waiting area, jaw clenched, hands gripping the armrest. Karen Westfield's attorney stood at a podium, his voice smooth and rehearsed. My client, Ms. Westfield, is a respected community member. She deeply regrets the tragic outcome of this misunderstanding. But let's be clear. She acted in fear for her life. The driver of the other vehicle was erratic, aggressive, and placed my client in danger. I wanted to throw the remote through the screen. A misunderstanding. He said it with such poise, like my daughter's blood was a public relations inconvenience. The reporters ate it up, jotting notes, repeating sound bites like parrots. The victim, the lawyer continued, was driving recklessly. My client attempted to create distance, but the other car followed. Believing she was being pursued, she drew her legally registered firearm in self-defense. We trust the court will see this for what it was, a tragic accident, not a crime. Beside me, Rebecca's breath hitched. She covered her mouth, eyes filling with tears. He's making her sound like the victim, she whispered. Like our daughter did something wrong. I muted the TV. It's what defense attorneys do, Rebecca. They twist facts until the truth suffocates. She shook her head. No, David. They can't get away with this. Not after what she did. You said there were witnesses. You said there was camera footage. There is, I said. But that won't stop her from trying to spin it. She's wealthy, connected, and ruthless. She'll use every trick her money can buy. Rebecca's hands began to shake. And what if it works? What if she walks free? What if... She broke down then, her words dissolving into sobs. I reached out, pulling her close, holding her as she cried. For a moment, I wasn't a sheriff. I wasn't a man of law. I was just a father who had no control over whether the world gave his daughter justice. The TV flickered again with breaking news, protesters gathering outside Riverside Estates. Some carried signs that read "Justice for Lily." Others, unbelievably, held up "Stand Your Ground means everyone and Second Amendment rights matter." The county was splitting in two, and my family was caught in the crossfire. See that? I said quietly. That's what happens when money meets media. They start rewriting the story before the ink even dries. James Chin arrived at the hospital with a file in his hands. "Boss, we've compiled statements from 8 residents," he said. "All confirm Karen's pattern of threats and intimidation. Some go back nearly 5 years. We've got HOA meeting minutes, security footage, even an email where she threatened to use force to maintain order." "Good," I said, taking the file. "We'll make sure the DA has every word of it. If her lawyer wants to play defense, we'll bury him in evidence." James hesitated. "Just be careful. The more public this gets, the more pressure will fall on you. They'll say you're too close, that you're using your position for revenge." "Then let them," I said, voice steady but cold. "Because this isn't revenge. This is accountability." I opened the file, flipping through statements written in shaky handwriting. Elderly residents, young families, people who'd lived in fear of a woman who wielded power like a weapon. All of them too scared to speak until now. "Always report threats," I murmured, half to myself. "Even if the person seems powerful. Silence only feeds monsters like her." Rebecca wiped her eyes and looked up at me. "What happens next?" "Now," I said, setting the file down, "we build a case she can't escape. Money might buy her a lawyer, but it won't buy her innocence." The day wore on, and the hospital grew quieter as night fell. Rebecca drifted into uneasy sleep beside Lily's bed, her hand resting gently on our daughter's wrist. I sat by the window, watching the red glow of news vans in the parking lot. My phone buzzed again with alerts. Another statement from Karen's lawyer, another headline questioning our side of the story. I ignored them all and turned to Lily, her small frame surrounded by machines that kept her alive. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, measured breaths. I leaned forward, speaking softly so only she could hear. "Don't you worry about the noise, sweetheart. Your old man's not done fighting." The monitor beeped once, then twice. A subtle rhythm change, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my heart skip. I stood, staring at the screen, and then at her face. Rebecca stirred beside me. "What is it?" I leaned closer, voice trembling. Her eyes, they just moved. Rebecca gasped, sitting upright. We both stared in disbelief as Lily's eyelids fluttered, slow and weak but unmistakable. For the first time in days I felt air fill my lungs again. Then Lily opened her eyes. The sound of her voice was the faintest thing, but it tore through me like thunder. "Mom?" Lily's whisper cracked the silence, fragile and soft as glass. Rebecca jolted awake, nearly falling from her chair. "Oh my God, baby! Lily!" she cried, clutching her daughter's hand. My throat tightened until I couldn't speak. I dreamed of this moment, prayed for it in the dark hours between heartbeats, but hearing her, seeing her eyes open, was like stepping out of a nightmare into sunlight. Dr. Patel burst into the room with 2 nurses in tow. "Lily," he said gently, leaning over her, "don't try to talk just yet. You're safe. You're in the hospital." Her eyes, still clouded with medication, moved between us. Rebecca's tears fell freely, splattering onto Lily's blanket. I moved closer, gripping the rail of her bed as if it would anchor me to the moment. "Dad," she whispered hoarsely, her voice breaking around the word. "I'm right here, sweetheart." My voice shook. "You're okay now? You're safe?" She blinked slowly, confusion flickering behind her eyes. "What happened?" Rebecca couldn't answer, so I did. "There was an accident, sweetheart. A woman hurt you. But you're safe now. The doctors are taking care of you." For a second, Lily's face went blank. Then her expression crumpled as memory returned. "The woman in the car," she murmured. "She was yelling at me. I said I was sorry. I didn't mean to cut her off. I was just trying to get to the pharmacy before it closed." Her voice broke into a sob. "Then she pointed something at me and—" "Shh," I said quickly, brushing tears from her cheek. "It's okay. You don't need to remember right now." But I could tell she did. Every detail. The look of rage in that woman's eyes. The deafening crack of the gun. The moment everything went dark. Lily was 16 years old, and she'd just lived through something most adults never recover from. Dr. Patel gave her a reassuring smile. You did incredibly well, Lily. You're a fighter, just like always. Rebecca squeezed her hand. You're our miracle, she whispered. But the relief in Patel's eyes didn't last long. He glanced at me, and I knew that look. I'd seen it on doctors, coroners, detectives. The look of someone about to deliver bad news. He cleared his throat. Lily, there's something we need to discuss, he said softly. The bullet that struck you is lodged very close to your heart. Too close. Lily frowned faintly. You're going to take it out, right? He hesitated. We can't. The position of the bullet makes surgery impossible. Trying to remove it would almost certainly cause your heart to fail. Rebecca gasped. So, you're saying it stays there? Yes, Patel said. We'll monitor it closely, but it must remain where it is. You'll need regular checkups, medication, and you'll have to avoid strenuous activity. Anything that raises your heart rate too much could be dangerous. Lily stared at him, her lower lip trembling. So I can't run anymore? I'm afraid not, he said gently. No sports, no overexertion, no stress if it can be avoided. Your heart is strong, but the risk is real. The silence that followed was unbearable. I saw her eyes fill with tears she tried not to let fall. I used to love running, she whispered. Now I can't even walk fast? Rebecca broke down beside her, sobbing openly. Baby, you're alive. That's all that matters. But I could see it in Lily's face, the heartbreak of understanding that her life had changed forever. She'd beaten death, but she would live with its reminder inside her chest for the rest of her days. Dr. Patel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Lily, you've survived something extraordinary. The bullet will always be there, but it doesn't have to define you. You just have to be careful. You have to live differently, but you will live. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. Okay, she said, her voice trembling but sure. If that's what it takes, I'll be careful. When he left the room, Rebecca crawled into the chair beside Lily's bed, holding her hand again. I sat down opposite them, staring at the monitors. Each steady beep was a victory, but each one also reminded me how fragile that victory was. Dad? Lily asked quietly. Yeah, sweetheart? That woman, is she in jail? I nodded. She is, but she's claiming it was self-defense. Lily blinked, disbelief washing over her tired face. Self-defense? I told her I was sorry. I didn't do anything wrong. I swallowed hard. I know. And we're going to make sure everyone else knows it too. For the first time since she'd woken, anger flickered behind her tears. Promise me she won't hurt anyone else. I promise, I said, though a part of me wondered if promises meant anything against someone with Karen Westfield's kind of power. Later that night, after Lily fell asleep again, I found James waiting outside her room with a file in hand. His face was pale, his expression grim. You need to see this, he said quietly. What is it? He handed me the folder. Karen's history. It's worse than we thought. And just like that, relief gave way to something darker, because when you think you've already seen the worst of someone, that's usually when the real truth starts to show its teeth. James closed the door to the hospital hallway behind him, shutting out the hum of machines. His expression was darker than I'd ever seen it. David, he said quietly, you might want to sit down before you read this. He handed me a thick file, 2 inches of paper bound with a rubber band. I'd seen case files like this before, usually belonging to repeat offenders or career criminals. But this one had a name on the front that still made my blood boil. Karen Westfield. I flipped it open. The first page was an incident report from 15 years ago. Another county. Another life. Arrested for assaulting a grocery clerk over a coupon dispute. Charges dropped. The next file. Restraining order filed by a neighbor after Karen threatened to burn down their home over a property line. Settled privately. The next. Employee fired from real estate agency after fouetade. Threatening a client with a letter opener. No charges. A decade of chaos followed. Neighbors intimidated. HOA members harassed. traffic altercations, and finally, 3 separate complaints of brandishing a firearm in public. Each time, she walked away untouched. How did she get away with all this? I muttered. James exhaled. Money, connections, fear. She knows how to silence people. Payoffs, intimidation, legal threats. The kind of person who always has a lawyer on speed dial and a donation in the mayor's campaign fund. I shook my head, disgusted. And yet she's still holding a concealed carry permit. She filed appeals, claimed each incident was a misunderstanding. And since most charges were dropped, nothing stuck. I looked down at the file again, flipping to the last page. Angela Torres's statement. The words hit harder than any bullet. We were all too afraid to report her. She said she could destroy us if we tried. That was the truth right there. Fear was her weapon, and she'd been firing it long before the gun that hit my daughter. I rubbed my eyes and took a slow breath. All of this, every threat, every outburst, it proves who she is. A pattern this strong doesn't happen by accident. James nodded. I already called the DA. She wants to meet. An hour later, I sat in the district attorney's office. Maria Santos was tough, sharp brown eyes, dark hair tied back, and a reputation for putting away men twice her size. She'd taken on gang cases, corruption, and now apparently HOA presidents with God complexes. Sheriff Morrison, she greeted, her voice steady but sympathetic. I'm so sorry about your daughter. How is she? Alive, I said. Barely. But she's fighting. She nodded slowly. Good. Then we fight with her. She opened the file I'd brought and scanned it quickly. This is extensive. A 15-year pattern of escalating aggression. It's the kind of history that screams intent. That's exactly what I want the jury to see, I said. Maria closed the folder and leaned forward. We can introduce some of it, but not all. The defense will claim it's prejudicial. Still, pattern evidence can establish intent, even when previous charges were dropped. If I can show the jury that this wasn't self-defense but a continuation of her violent behavior, we have a real shot. I nodded. Then do it. Use everything. She gave a faint smile. I like your fire, Sheriff, but remember, this isn't vengeance. It's about justice. We're going to build the strongest case possible. Attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment. Maximum sentencing. Whatever it takes, I said. Maria's eyes softened for just a moment. David, you need to prepare yourself. Karen's wealthy, polished, and white-collar clean. No convictions on paper. Her lawyer will make her look like a victim. A frightened woman defending herself from a so-called aggressive driver. And juries. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Juries are unpredictable. The words sank like stones in my stomach. I looked out the window at the courthouse across the street, its flag fluttering in the wind. Somewhere inside, 12 strangers would one day decide whether justice lived or died. I thought of Lily, her fragile heart still beating with the bullet lodged beside it, and I knew we couldn't afford unpredictability. Because for people like Karen Westfield, the system had been predictable for too long, and it always seemed to end in their favor. 6 months later, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. The walls felt too small, the air too heavy. Lily sat beside me in her wheelchair, her chest rising slowly under the thin hospital gown she refused to replace with anything fancier. Dr. Patel had begged her not to attend. Too much stress, too much risk, but she'd looked him in the eye and said, I need her to see me alive. Karen Westfield entered the room looking like she'd walked off the cover of a lifestyle magazine. Perfect hair, pearls, a soft beige suit. No trace of the woman who'd screamed at my daughter through a car window. She smiled faintly at the jurors, as if she belonged there. When her gaze met mine, the smile vanished. The prosecution went first. Maria Santos stood tall, her voice crisp and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not about road rage. It's about control. It's about a woman who has spent years using fear as a weapon. And this time she used a gun. Witness after witness testified, Angela Torres, Officer Martinez, the bystanders who'd watched Lily apologize seconds before the gun fired. Then came the footage, Karen's black Mercedes pulling alongside Lily's car, the flash of metal, the sound of glass exploding. When it was her turn, Karen took the stand, dabbing fake tears from the corners of her eyes. "I was terrified," she said. "That car cut me off. I thought I was being attacked. The gun just went off." Maria stepped forward, voice calm but slicing. "You fired through a closed window, then fled. You didn't call 911. You didn't check on the victim. Self-defense fails when you flee the scene or act after the threat is gone." "Which one was it, Miss Westfield?" Karen froze. The mask cracked. And as the jury filed out to deliberate, Lily's trembling hand found mine. "Dad," she whispered, "what if they let her go?" The courtroom was silent when the jury returned. Even the air seemed to stop moving. I could feel Lily's trembling beside me, her heart monitor faintly beeping beneath her sweater. The foreman stood, paper in hand, his voice steady but heavy. "On the charge of attempted murder, guilty. On assault with a deadly weapon, guilty. On reckless endangerment, guilty." Rebecca gasped, covering her mouth. I felt the air rush from my lungs, a weight I'd carried for months finally lifting. Across the aisle, Karen's face drained of color. Her lawyer whispered something frantically, but she jerked away, eyes wide and wild. Judge Halpern adjusted his glasses, his voice cold as stone. "Ms. Westfield, this court has reviewed every piece of evidence. This was no accident. It was a pattern of violence, entitlement, and complete disregard for human life. You terrorized your community for years, and when a teenage girl apologized to you, you answered with a bullet." Karen's lip curled. "That girl ruined my life." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "No, Ms. Westfield, you ruined your life. And hers." He leaned forward. "For attempted murder, 25 years. Assault with a deadly weapon, 15 consecutive. Reckless endangerment, 5 consecutive. Total, 45 years in state prison. Parole eligibility after 35. Karen screamed as deputies restrained her. "You can't do this to me. I was defending myself." Lily rolled her wheelchair to the microphone, her voice soft but clear. "I forgive her," she said. "Because anger destroys everything, and I won't let it destroy me." The crowd fell silent. Even the judge's eyes softened. "What about you? Would you forgive the person who shot your child?" As they dragged Karen from the room, I looked at Lily, my daughter, alive and unbroken. And 2 years later, her story was still being written. 2 years later, the world looked different. Lily turned 18 last month. And though her life would never be the same, she was living it louder and braver than ever. The bullet was still there, nestled close to her heart, a reminder of the day everything changed, but it didn't own her. It never would. Every morning, she straps on her portable heart monitor before heading to the community center. She doesn't hide it anymore. "If people stare," she once told me, smiling, "let them. It means they're looking at someone who survived." She's now a volunteer for a victims' rights group, speaking at schools about anger, accountability, and gun safety. The first time I saw her walk up to a podium, still fragile, still shaking slightly, I felt a pride that no medal or badge could ever match. Karen Westfield remains behind bars. Her appeals were denied. Her empire of intimidation crumbled. The HOA she once ruled through fear has transformed under new leadership. Neighbors planting community gardens instead of filing complaints, hosting barbecues instead of boardroom battles. The same people who once whispered about property lines now bring each other soup when they're sick. Out of Karen's cruelty, something better was born. Rebecca and I visit the courthouse memorial every spring, where Lily's story is engraved on a plaque dedicated to victims of violence. Sometimes she runs her fingers over the words, then looks at me and says, "Dad, the bullet didn't win." And every time she says it, I believe her a little more. I still wear the badge, but I see it differently now. Justice isn't just about putting people behind bars. It's about what survives afterward. It's about the strength that grows in the cracks left behind by tragedy. That night, I stood in Lily's doorway, watching her work on her college essay. She looked up, caught me staring, and smiled that same smile that carried us through every storm. "What?" She laughed softly. "Nothing," I said. "Just, I love you. I love you too, Dad." And as I walked away, I realized the truth I'd been chasing since the day she was shot. Karen Westfield tried to destroy our family, to shatter our peace, but she failed because the bullet didn't win.